For this video, we'll be using the Have a Seat Labubu, brown, green, and white yarn. And then we have a 3.5mm crochet hook, a 3mm crochet hook, and this one we'll be using for the cup. We have our fabric glue, a darning needle, stitch markers, and a pair of scissors. You also need to have made the hoodie as well as the bodysuit. You can find the hoodie under our all-purpose hoodie tutorial and the bodysuit, which can be made from our Panda costume tutorial. The links are in the description. The stitches used in this video include the single crochet, slip stitch, chain stitch, and a magic circle. For the ear, I'm going to make it slightly larger than the panda ear by 1 row. So I'm going to start with a magic circle. And then inside the magic circle, I'm going to do 6 single crochets. So we're going to start with our first. Then our second, third, fourth, fifth, and our 6th single crochet inside the magic circle. And then we're going to pull the tail to bring the crochets in that circle. For the next row, we're going to do increases in each of the stitches. So here we have our first single crochet. We're going to add the stitch marker. And in the same stitch, another single crochet for the increase. And then we're going to keep making these increases in each of the stitches. There's our second, our third, our fourth, our fifth, and our 6th increase. And here we should have 12 single crochets all the way around. Let's tighten the circle. And we're ready for the next row. After the increases, we're going to do 12 single crochets in the next 2 rows. So we're going to start with our first row of 12 single crochets. There's our first stitch. And then we're going to continue making our single crochets all the way around, and we're going to do this 2 times. So we should have a total of 2 rows of 12 single crochets. And then we'll return back to see how our ear looks. And here we're on our final crochet of our 2nd row. And now we're just going to finish it off. I'm going to cut our yarn. And if you want to, you can leave the yarn to sew the ear on, but I'm just going to cut it all the way off and start with the new piece of yarn to sew it on. So we're going to pull our yarn through, remove our stitch marker. Then I'm going to turn the ear so it's facing the correct way. And here's our ear. And we're going to take the darning needle and we're going to make our fake little stitch. So we're going to skip a crochet, go into the next one, and then down into the back loop of the original. And then we're just going to weave in our tail. Then we're going to cut it. Or we could have just put a knot tying two of them together. And then we have our ear. To make the beanie, we're going to start with 13 chains. There's our slip knot, and then we're going to do 13 chains. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 chains. Then we're going to do a chain 1, and we're going to do single crochets in these back stitches. So you can see these stitches going straight down. We're going to do our crochets in these stitches rather than into the V's. So here you're going to see one way up here. We're going to skip this one that's way up on top here, and we're going to go into the second one. So we're going to go in to that chain, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops for our single crochet, and we're going to add our stitch marker. And then we're going to continue making our single crochets into the little back stitch of our chain. That's our second, third, fourth, fifth, here's our sixth. We're going to continue this till we get to the end of the row, and then we'll start with our next row. And here we're on our final crochet in this last stitch at the very top. And we should have a total of 13 single crochets. For our next row, we're going to start with a chain 1, turn our work, and then for this row we're going to be doing single crochets in the inside loops. So not the loops that face you, but the ones on the other side. So we're going to take our crochet hook, insert it into that inside loop, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through 2. And that's our first crochet. We're going to add our stitch marker. And then we're going to continue to go into these inside loops to make our single crochets. There's 3, 4, 5, number 6. We're going to continue to make these until we get to the end of the row, and then we'll meet back. And here we're on our last single crochet of the row. We should have 13. For all of the rows, we should have 13 single crochets. And for our next row, we're going to do a chain 1, and then we're going to start again in the inside loops. So we're going to start in this loop here, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. We're going to continue this till we get to the end of the row. And here we're on our final single crochet, and we should have a total of 13 of them. And then we're going to continue making these single crochets in that inside loop by starting with that chain 1 and then going into the inside loops for single crochets. We're going to do this for a total of 40 rows. Once we're done with the 40 rows, we'll meet back for our next steps. So here I finished all 40 rows, and if you notice, every one of these like bumps is 2 rows. So if you count these, you should have 20 of them at the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Or if you're counting this way and you want to see how many you have, one of the rows goes on the bump, and then one row goes in the middle. So you can count how many bumps you have and then how many middles you have, and that should equal 40. So here I have a marker on every 5. So here I have 8 markers, which is 40 rows. Once we're done with our 40 rows, we're going to bring them together. And I have the yarn on this side, and I'm going to place a hook inside that first corner stitch and make a slip stitch. So I'm going to yarn over, pull through that stitch, and then pull through the loop on the hook. And then I'm going to go into this first stitch on this corner and then go back into that same stitch where we just made the slip stitch. And I'm going to yarn over and pull through both stitches and then through the loop on the hook. And then I'm going to continue to make these slip stitches all the way across. So in these two, I'm going to yarn over, pull through the 2 stitches, and pull through the loop on the hook. Then I'm going to go into the next set of stitches, yarn over and pull through the 2 and through the loop on the hook. And then on the next 2, yarn over, pull through the 2 and then through the loop. Then we're going to continue to go through the 2 sets of stitches and then make a slip stitch. And then finally the last 2 stitches on the corner. Once we have our ends together, we're going to make slip stitches across so that it doesn't look so bumpy. So I'm going to call these like little hills and these little valleys. So we're going to start with the valley here. And so we're going to make a slip stitch in that first little chain looking thing. And then in this next stitch, we're going to make another slip stitch. So that's 2. And then we're going to go into the next one. Here's the little hill part, and this is a little valley part. So we're going to make a slip stitch here and then go into the next stitch, make another slip stitch. So then there's the hill, then there's this opening, and we're going to make a slip stitch, and there's another stitch, and we're going to make a slip stitch. So here again, the valley part, we're going to make a slip stitch and another slip stitch. So 2 slip stitches in each of these valley parts of the stitches that we had made. So we're just smoothing it out. See, we have our slip stitches here rather than seeing the jagged edge. So we're just going to continue making these all the way around, and we'll meet back when we're done with all of these little slip stitches. So here I'm on my last stitch. So here's my final slip stitch. And then here I have the slip stitch where we started. So I'm going to pull out the yarn and cut it. And then I'm going to make our fake little crochet, our fake little stitch. So I'm going to skip the stitch, go into the next one. And then I'm going to go back into this stitch here, just the back loop. So it looks like we have a stitch that's continuous. And then we're just going to weave in the end. I'm just going to go this way. So when we flip it, it's not visible. I'm just going to go through these stitches here. And then I'm going to cut it. And then this is the part that we're going to flip up. So then we could see the slip stitches that we just made rather than the jagged edge. So here on the bottom we have our slip stitches, and then on the top here we're going to do stitches just in these heels. So just in these top portions where they stick out, we're going to go through these little stitches up here. So just in the top part. And I think this is where we started. Okay, so once we're done with going through those loops on the top, we're going to pull the yarn so that it comes together. And then we're going to get our Labubu. So here we have the Labubu, and we just want to make sure that her ears don't go through. Unless if you want the ears to go through, then you could put it lower and have the ears go through. You know, open it up a little bit more. But here we're going to flip at the bottom. And we're going to flip it to where there's 3 stitches. So this third stitch should be towards the bottom. And you can sew it here if you want to the hat together. Or you can just leave it and just flip it up how it is. So if you want the ears to show, you'll leave a bigger opening. But if you don't, then you'll just close it by pulling the string. And you'll just have enough for the little tag to come out. This should go towards the back. And then once it's nice and tight and the hat has a nice shape to it, we can cut the ends off. Then just tie a knot so that it doesn't come apart. And we're going to weave in the ends. Once we have our end sewn in, we're finished with our little beanie. Now we're going to make a little coffee cup for our Labubu. We're going to start with a magic circle. And in our magic circle, we're going to do 5 single crochets. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 single crochets. And then we're going to pull our tail to bring all of the crochets together in that magic circle. For our next row, we're going to do an increase in each of the 5 stitches. So we're going to start with our first single crochet in this first stitch. And I'm going to get a stitch marker. And then in that same stitch, we're going to do another single crochet to make that increase. And then we're going to continue making increases all the way around. There's our second increase. Our third increase. Our fourth. And here's our fifth increase. And we should have 10 single crochets going all the way around. Let's tighten up this circle a little bit. And we're ready for the next row. For the next row, we're going to do single crochets in the back loop. So this is the front of the loop and the back of the loop of this stitch. So I'm going to remove the stitch marker. And we'll be going into this back loop and we're going to go all the way around. So we're going to start with our first single crochet. We're going to add our stitch marker. And then here's our second. And in this back loop, the third. And in the back loop, fourth. The back loop, fifth. Back loop. Again in the back. And here we are in that back loop. We're almost finished. And here is our last crochet in the row. And we should have 10 of them. And we're going to make sure that we have it on the correct side so we can flip it over. So we're going to do 4 more rows of these. So we should have a total of 5 rows of single crochets all done in the back loops. So here is one. Let's put in our stitch marker. So when I have 4 of these stitch markers, that means I finished 4 of the rows of 10 single crochets in the back loop. So I'm going to continue making single crochets in the back loop until I have 4 rows. And here is my last single crochet in the back loop of the cup. So now I've completed 1, 2, 3, and 4 rows, and we're going to pull our yarn, then cut it. I'm going to remove all 4 of my stitch markers. And then I'm going to pull out the yarn and make that fake little stitch with the darning needle. So here we have the darning needle. We're going to skip a stitch, go into the next stitch, and then into the back loop of the first stitch. And then we're going to weave in the tail. So we're just going to go through a few of the loops here. And then cut the yarn. And then we're done with our little cup. And then we're going to stuff it. And here I have some leftover pieces of the brown yarn, so we can stuff this so it looks like there's coffee inside. As we stuff it, we want to shape it a little bit. I want to make sure that that bottom is flat. And then here with your final one, if you want to, you could break up the top. And then place it inside. Then it looks like you have some steam coming out of the cup. And now we're done with our little coffee cup. And we're going to make a lid for it. Or you can skip the lid and just drink it like this. To make the lid, we're going to make a magic circle. And inside of our magic circle, we're going to do 6 single crochets. So there's 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, and number 6. And then we're going to pull the tail to bring our circle together. Next, we're going to do an increase in each of the single crochets. We're going to start with our first single crochet. We're going to add our stitch marker. And then we're going to do our second crochet in that same stitch to make an increase. And then we're going to do an increase in the next stitch. There's our second. Here's our third. Our fourth. Our fifth increase. and our 6th increase. And here we should have a total of 12 single crochets. For our next row, we're going to do 12 single crochets in the back loops. So we're going to do our first single crochet in the back loop. Then we're going to add our stitch marker. And then our second. And these are all in the back loop. There's our third, our fourth, our 5th single crochet in the back loop, and our 12th single crochet in the back loop. And then we're finished with that row, and with the lid we're going to pull up our yarn. Then we're going to cut the tail. I'm also going to cut the long tail for the middle a little bit shorter. Then we're going to pull out the yarn. Let's pull this a little bit tighter if possible. We're going to flip over our lid. And then we're going to get our darning needle. And here we're going to make a little fake single crochet. So we're going to skip one and then into the next, and then into the back loop of that original stitch. And we're going to let it blend in and then weave in our end. And then we're going to cut the tail. And here we should be done with our lid for our little coffee cup. And here we have our coffee cup, and we have our lid, and we're just going to place that right on top. And then we're finished with our coffee cup with a lid. And if you want to, you can either glue or sew the back on so you can still open up your coffee cup. Now that we're finished with our lid and our cup of coffee, we can put that green dot on there to mark our cup. And you can also maybe make a heart or your initial or whatever you'd like. And then we have our cup with a little marker. So once we're finished with the beanie and our ears, we're going to sew them onto the hoodie. So I've already placed one of the ears so that the beanie between, and here I have it 7 crochets up. So if I'm starting at the bottom here, I'm not going to count this one here, but the next. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going through the 7th stitch, through the bottom of the ear and through the top of the ear. So we're going to do this on the other side. We're going to count the 7 stitches, but if you want to place it somewhere else, you can do that as well. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to place the bottom of the ear on this 7th stitch. I'm going to go through that stitch and through the ear. So through this stitch up here. So this is how it's going to look, and then we can also sew the beanie on after we sew the ears on. So here I've sewn on one of the ears, and now we're going to sew on the other side. So I'm going to turn the Labubu around, but you can actually take the hoodie off the Labubu and sew it that way. It might be easier, but I'm just going to leave her in. So I'm going to turn her to the side and remove the darning needle that's holding the ear on, since we know where we're going to place it. And here I have the darning needle with the yarn on here ready, and I have enough yarn so it'll go around the ear. So we're going to start with the 7 stitches up, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and then we're going to go into that 7th stitch. I'm going to go this way, and then I'm going to go into the ear. So I'm going to leave a little bit yarn out to leave a tail so that it doesn't go all the way through. And then I'm going to go into the side stitch of the ear, and then I'm going to go back into the hoodie, so into that next stitch. I'm going into these bottom stitches here of the hoodie, and then I'm going to go into the next stitch on the ear, and through the adjacent stitch going down, and then I'm going to go through the next stitch on the hoodie. And then into the next stitch on the ear, then down that adjacent stitch, and through the stitch on the hoodie. And then I'm going into that corner stitch on the ear. So now we're going towards the other side. And then I'm going to go into this next stitch on the hoodie. And then here we're in the front of the ear. So I'm going to go into the next stitch on the ear, then down that adjacent stitch, and then I'm going into the next stitch here on the hoodie. So into these 2 stitches, then I'm going back up into the next stitch on the ear, and down that adjacent stitch, then into the next stitch on the hoodie. And through the next stitch on the ear, and down that adjacent stitch, which is the corner stitch, and then we're going to tie a knot here at the end. And then we're going to cut it off. And here I left a little bit of the tails on the hoodie so that we can sew them inside. So we're just going to take the darning needle. This might actually be easier if we took the hoodie off. since we're going inside the hoodie. So we're going to go into that stitch of the hoodie, and then we're going to just weave this end in. So we're just going through these stitches here. And then we're going to take the other side. And then I'm just going to tie the two together in a knot. And I'm just going to cut it off. And then here we're done attaching the ears. So now we're going to sew on the beanie. We have our hoodie and then the beanie, and we want to make sure that the back where the two stitches are together are in the back of the hoodie. And then we're going to start on this very side stitch right by the ear. So I'm going into the second row of stitches right by the ear, and I have my darning needle with enough yarn to go around the beanie, but I'm not going to sew all the way around. I'm just going to place stitches in certain places. So then I'm going to go into the third stitch on the beanie. So there's 1, 2, and then 3. So I'm going to go into this stitch here. And then I'm going to go into the next stitch on the hoodie. And then back up into the next stitch on the hoodie. And then on that third stitch on the beanie, 1, 2, 3. Then down into the next stitch on the hoodie. Now that we've finished sewing on our beanie onto our hoodie, we're ready to place it onto our Labubu. We're going to place her ears inside the beanie. And then we want to make sure we get our little tag out for the key ring. And here it is. And then we're going to center our hoodie on. And here you can decide if you want to tie it in the back or tie it in the front. I'm just going to tie it in the front here. Make sure it's nice and straight. That looks pretty good. And then we're going to attach our key ring. We have our key ring on. And here we have our cup with our little green dot on there. And we can place it in the middle, or have her hold it. So I think we're going to place our cup in the middle. And we're going to place some glue onto the middle of her tummy. And then on the back of the cup. We want to make sure that the back of our cup has the glue and not our front, so that we can open up our cup. And now we're going to stick this on the middle of her tummy. We'll let the glue dry. And now we're finished with our Labubu in her little bear costume, wearing a little green beanie, having a nice hot cup of coffee or tea. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. It wasn't too long, but still an hour. If we would have added the body and the hoodie to the video, it would have been over 2 hours. If you found this video useful, please hit that thumbs up button. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Also, click on that notification bell so you know when our next tutorial is out. Have a wonderful day.